Maxwell. I'm the
through the TAP program. He said St. Clair County doesn't really put in anything.
You have your term limit unless by unanimous support.
That's a good approach. I like that.
Commissioner Brush, will you please take your seat? Call to order the St. Clair County Board of Commissioners workshop regarding our board goals. Pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Beaton.
Present.
Commissioner Trello.
Here.
Commissioner Felix.
Here.
Commissioner Rushing.
Here.
Commissioner Vandenbosch.
Here.
Commissioner Angie.
Present.
Commissioner Chairperson Samasco.
Present. Do we have any citizens wishing to address the board? We have some latecomers. I've seen none. We have new business, which I'll turn over to our administrator. It's been several years since we've had one of these, but Back in the day, that's who did those. Is that how we're going to do that, Carrie? Please?
So the last time that the board established a goals session, I believe, was 2016, 2017. So what we have done, we went through the process to update that document. We had a department head meeting. We solicited input from all of the departments, and you'll see a document in front of you with a listing of everything that was submitted by the departments. And what we did is we took what was submitted by all the departments and took those into some larger overarching goals that those fall into those different categories. You know, some of the departments have some very specific projects that they want to work on that could fall under, you know, efficient government operations. But the goal is, once the board decides on what your overarching goals are, we'll categorize each of the department goals to fall under a category, and then we will compile that into a final document that will be placed on our website for the public to see. So our overall categories were ensure efficient and responsible government, use organizational resources to create a prosperous community and improve quality of life, review and develop overall facility plan to ensure organization and department needs are met, enhance and maintain a highly skilled, efficient county workforce, evaluate and enhance government services. And we have landfill operations on here. While that could fall under efficient government services or enhancing government services, with what's going on at the landfill, we kind of felt that that kind of deserved its own category right now. Okay, whoops. So for efficient and responsive government services, one of the most important things that the board does, obviously, is the fiscal management, maintaining adequate reserves, maintaining or improving our current bond rating, and then just transparency in our budgeting and spending practices. We want to ensure that that information is easily accessible to the public by making sure it's all on our website and easy to find. The more information we're able to provide on our website, it provides that to the public. It reduces FOIA requests coming into our office because citizens are able to find that information easily on our website. Citizen engagement is very important. We want to increase in communication to citizens and their opportunities to participate, whether it be on different boards and commissions or different workshops that the board is having. Last year, we did create a new website for boards and commissions where all the different positions are listed out there, vacancies, but we do need to do some more work to maybe promote that a little better so citizens know when vacancies are coming up, what's available. So we'll be working on strategies to communicate that better as well. Increasing interdepartment communication is also important. One theme that's also coming through is when we see different things coming through from departments. I think there's a lot of times where departments may not know what other departments do fully. So we want to make sure that interdepartment communication is really improved, that the information is going out to everybody. A lot of department head meetings happen regularly, not always monthly, because there's not enough content to bring everyone in. However, that information doesn't always filter down to the employees. So we'll be working on strategies to make sure that information is available and shared with everyone. These goals, the plan would be to have departments update these goals annually. We'll update the document, but then also provide metrics that we can report out to the public on the goals, on how we're doing and what has been accomplished, add new goals to it. And then if there's programs that aren't successful, we also need to evaluate that as well. So having a prosperous community and improving quality of life. We have many departments that provide direct assistance to our communities. Many departments work with local units of government and our citizens to provide services such as our emergency management office, planning, equalization, sheriff, GIS, just to name a few. So we can enhance those services, make sure that communities know what services are available to them and what assistance we can provide to them. We also have many very robust millages that provide services to our citizens that are unique to our county. Many counties don't have a veterans or a seniors millage, the library, our park system. So all of these items can leverage, improve the quality of life, and attract residents to our area. We do have devote resources to support economic development initiatives on here. Now, that's been a past goal of the board. I know you have had several workshops, and there's one scheduled next week. So that's kind of on there as a question mark to see what direction the board does plan to take on that. So we do have it on here as a placeholder until a final decision is made.
That's on bullet point 2 you're talking about?
The third bullet point down there, yes. So facility planning and maintenance, this was a pretty big discussion with departments. We have actually most of our facilities are aging. Even, the new administration building that we call the new building is now over 25 years old. We have many facilities that have needs. Our courthouse has needs for security upgrades, ADA upgrades, plumbing and electrical. The intervention center has upgrades needed. We have facilities that no longer meet the needs of the department. They no longer have adequate space. So airport, emergency management, animal control, all of our facilities have some maintenance needs. So it's very important that we utilize our capital improvement plan, prioritize those capital improvements that are needed, and bring those to the board for you to prioritize which you want us to work on first. Also, as part of that, preventative maintenance schedules, having documented plans and schedules. Many of these items are already happening, but they're not necessarily documented. So having documented plans and schedules make it easy if there's any sort of staff turnover in positions. Anybody can say, this is the last time this equipment was maintenanced, and this is the next time it's due for budgeting and planning. We also need to strengthen safety protocols at many of our buildings. I know courthouse security has been discussed. Many buildings, like this building has no security in it. So there's different buildings that need some definite enhancements. So that falls under aging facilities that just no longer meet the demands of current operations. A skilled and efficient workforce. This was also a very large topic of discussion with the department heads. Recruitment and retention is something that impacts all departments. The last time we did a wage study and job analysis, that was in 2016-17, and it was implemented end of 2018. We do believe it's appropriate to go through that exercise again. However, there is more to recruitment and retention than just wages for employee job satisfaction and employee morale. So there were many good ideas discussed by department heads, including job fairs, educational assistance, benefit reviews, some recognition programs, and also working on better communication of the benefits that are available. One thing we find is sometimes employees aren't aware of all the current benefits that are available to them, perhaps through their health insurance plan or different options that they have. So we're going to be working on better communication strategies, which I think you're going to find that's a theme throughout all this, is enhancing our communication. One idea was also having a monthly new employee orientation that falls into, for IT cybersecurity reasons, to show employees proper IT protocols, but also educate them on their benefits that's available, and simple things like who to call when something happens. If something breaks, what do you do? If you fall and get injured, what do you do? So just those basic items, perhaps a simple 1-hour orientation once a month or once a quarter for new employees to get that information out there. So enhance and evaluate government services. So this is an interesting one. One thing we find is many residents and even between departments don't understand or don't fully understand the services that are provided. Many times people will call and think that the government or that the county provides a service, but it could be provided either at the state level, at a city or a township level. So I think clearly defining what we do, what services are available, and what citizens need to do to access those, having that information readily available on our website for them would be very helpful. Using that, evaluating services, mandatory versus non-mandatory, but also services that are important to residents. Balancing those needs for those services with our limited resources. Prioritizing that, adapting the services to meet the evolving needs of our population. Many services that and how we've traditionally provided them may no longer be relevant. It's how we've done it 10, 20 years ago. So it's important to constantly evaluate the services we provide and how we're providing them to make sure it maintains relevant. Maximizing the use of technology to enhance our service delivery, and just staying transparent throughout the process, making sure those discussions happen here at the board level so citizens have a voice in the design and delivery of these services. The last item on here, which I believe will probably warrant a workshop of its own down the road, is landfill operations. The future of the landfill operations. Does the board want to stay in the landfill business? Addressing some of the long-term liabilities associated with that. The future of the bioreactor, how the board would like to operate the landfill going forward, some of the environmental concerns, working through the process with Eagle. So there's a lot to discuss with the landfill that I think would be too deep of a topic for today. However, it does need to be on the radar and as part of long-term goals.
Don't we have I know there's some legal opinions we're going to be considering in closed session. Would that include some of that? I mean, is that scheduled or not scheduled? Isn't that something coming up in a few weeks?
Yes, next Wednesday at 3 p.m. is the special board meeting with the only item on the agenda being the closed session. I mean, of course, the meeting will be open. There'll be time for public comment, and then we will go into closed session.
That was for purposes of considering some of the litigation, the class action, the enforcement action, something, and some, a couple of legal memorandums, I believe, which would be exempt.
That's correct.
Would allow for a closed session.
That's correct. And I believe those items will be relevant for information for you before you can make any decisions on future landfill operations.
It's kind of a status, too. I understand that's been going on for some time, and, you know, we never really had a status on that from Corporation Council, so.
No, we're at a point with our discussions with EGO where it is appropriate to update the board as to where we're at.
Thank you.
So that's kind of the basis or the outline. I don't know if the board would like to go through each category, add some input, what you would like added, not added to refine this document. We did invite all the department heads here. We certainly want their input. Everything they submitted to us is in the detailed document. There's some specifics like, scanning documents, implementing new programs in departments. And we feel that's important to have in front of the board because all these are going to require funding, resources, but all go into enhancing efficient operations.
I guess I'd like to see the, this several-page document with the suggestions from department heads titled, 2025 Department Head Goals as submitted for consideration at the 2020-2025 goal-setting workshop. I don't mind having that, but there's some things, I mean, I know you've been tied up with some family matters and so forth, and there's a lot of information here, so we're not going to, I don't want you to go through everything on here, but I'm going to treat this, if it's appropriate, as a informational document and then focus more on the general goal-setting sheet that you did. And you think it kind of allows us to address most or all of what's in this other detailed document, Carrie, is that fair to say?
Yes, everything that the department submitted would fall under these overarching goals.
Okay.
Carrie, I had a question regarding the wage study. As you know, I'm new to the board. Is that typical to be that long, or were there extenuating circumstances that it's been since 2016, 17?
So the one prior to that, I believe, was maybe 2002, 2003. It had been a long time. However, during union negotiations or every union negotiation cycle, we do review what other counties are doing. We don't do a full wage study. That it does take a significant amount of time and resources to do that project. So we kind of keep up with trends to see, what across the board increases are happening, what other counties are doing with benefits. Sometimes we may fall behind, sometimes we're ahead of others. But, as we can see with recruiting, retaining, and then just some of the presentations that you've seen from department heads, it is appropriate at this time. My recommendation is we do a full wage study.
Okay, thank you.
I've done an item, Carrie, for other people are thinking here. On your first bullet point, the transparency and accountability, keep public informed about county government activities, be accountable. And this third bullet point, citizen engagement, encourage residents to participate. That's really kind of central to what's kind of going on with the EDA, as far as I'm concerned. I'd like to add the words, and any non-governmental entity that we fund, so that would include, because that was a big part to me of what,
Good idea.
what we're trying to accomplish with the EDA is to get them to come alongside us with respect to the accountability, participation, transparency issue, and I just think I'd like to see that, a couple things added on that, so. There's no objection, I don't know. Now, as a board, what's the flavor of the board here? I mean, we can, this is fairly self-explanatory to me. Do we want to have Carrie go through in detail any of this, or do you want us to have question and answer? Do you want to, things that might not be on here that you want to see if they're on here, add if anyone has goals or objectives that aren't listed here, because it's the first chance we've really had to address that issue. How would you guys like to proceed? Any thoughts?
There's a lot to digest here, so I'm going to have to look at it.
Okay, well,
I'd first like to say thank you to Carrie and the department heads for the time that you took to express the needs of the department. I know you all have a lot going on in the day-to-day, but I appreciate you guys bringing this forward to us. It's important that we hear from you. I think for me, these 6 goals they're huge. It is a heavy lift. And then how do we prioritize within, so it's great that we want to increase safety in our buildings, but how do we prioritize that? We have aging facilities, how do we prioritize what facilities we focus on first? You know, I think the goals are good, but they're big, they're lofty, and I'm all for, you know, taking them on. But how does the board want to proceed with prioritizing? Excuse me.
Well, some of them will be self-fulfilling, like the landfills coming at us. It's moving along. I know where that's at with the enforcement action. We need to take some action on those things. This issue with the EDA has been moving along. I think that's going to come to a head, so to speak, within the next month or so. The other things, I guess I would just treat them as, you know, the general goals without any real particular, without having some particular item. I say, okay, Sally Port for the courthouse, I'd put that as, you know, a very important matter. Maybe I'd bring that up to say, let's look at bonding that and getting that done so we have a Sally Port on the north side of the courthouse and maybe an additional elevator for redundancy for the 100-year-old elevators. You know, okay, that's how I'd approach it is, as we roll forward here, we'll put some things out and see if the board wishes to address it at that time. And if Carrie says, well, we can't do it because of some financial thing or whatever, that's kind of how we've always done it. It's not, we've never had really a list with a pecking order and dedicate our resources that way. So that's how I'd see it rolling out.
So whatever squeaky wheel
Whatever the
gets
squeaky wheel,
to
yeah.
Commissioner first.
You'd be right there.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, no, maybe it's not the best way to do it, but that's kind of maybe by default, kind of how it's occurred. You know, things come up, you have to address them as they come up. Those become priority one, lawsuits and things like that. And then after that, I mean, I agree with you that we do, at least it should have some plan. I mean, plan the work the plan. I get it. I'm not bucking that. I'm just, don't know who's going to take that up. Go ahead, Carrie.
So if I may, for the capital improvements, we do have our annual capital improvement plan that's updated, and those projects are scored. So I think that's a good first tool to look at. You know, certainly we could provide recommendations that there are needs in every building. However, there are needs that rise to the top in certain buildings. You know, I would think the courthouse needs, some of the needs at the intervention center, that many of are underway with the HVAC system, you know, the courthouse, the elevators, those were priority projects. So we could certainly provide a list of, you know, what's in the capital improvement plan, you know, what we see as a priority. You know, funding wise, most of these are very large projects, so they would all likely require us to issue debt for. It's not something we could finance internally. So we would have to look at bonding them, which is fine. That wouldn't be something that would prohibit any of these projects from moving forward.
It's like animal control. We've got the estimates coming on, the architecture designs and all that, and then that kind of a thing. Okay, where's that fit on capital improvement and how we're going to proceed on it? Could we want to try and, I mean, is that something we could do across the board with other things, or is that pretty much all we've ever done is the capital improvement in that manner?
Ideally, capital projects should be in the capital improvement plan because it's a 5-year plan. It allows us to plan for items, budget for them, so we know what's coming down the pike. You know, we know 5 years from now we need to replace the roof on a building, so we start planning for it, budgeting for it. Understandably, stuff happens, stuff breaks unexpectedly, so things happen outside of that. But the large projects should be in the CIP, you know, the Sally Port, that project is in the capital improvement plan. You know, the animal control building, that's in the capital improvement plan. Many of these items are. There's some technology items that are in the capital improvement. those are things that, the public may not see, but it's the stuff behind the scenes that keeps everything running smoothly that's important.
Carrie, I had a question. Does the county have, or has it ever had, a maintenance budget where individual departments project their maintenance needs and then you establish a budget for that? I understand the capital improvement plan, but this would be a little bit different. And I know in industry that often forestalls needing something more serious if you keep after it.
So we have a maintenance department where all those items are budgeted for within the maintenance department. And that's broken out. We have a separate budget for like the administration building, for the intervention center. There's different cost centers within the maintenance budget.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone have things they want to add that aren't here, or see if they fit into what is here? I don't know. This, to me, is, like I say, is a general planning document. I think it's overarching, and it suffices for notifying the public the things that we're looking at as general goals and objectives. If that's the purpose of what we're doing here, I'm okay with that, with the one addition I had there. On this item 2, devote resources to support economic development, I would word it a little differently, basically, that we examine economic development, which we are, that is supported with county funding, and to determine how we're going to continue that going forward, whether it's the same model or different model or blended model. That's kind of where I'm at with economic development. And this fits. I mean, I'm not trying to be so specific, but that's how I'm going to treat this planning document, as an overarching document. That's kind of what the idea here, Carrie?
Yeah, that one, I think after next week's workshop, we might have a better idea of where the board as a whole intends to go with economic development. So we kind of kept the wording from the last goal session, knowing that that's kind of a question mark.
Well, I think it's plenty. Like Lisa said, it covers most of what we do, and probably a lot of things we don't even know we're going to do, or have to do.
I'd like to add a couple of things. I've got several things actually, but I'll spread them out a little. Something that's bothered me, and I know residents have expressed, when we have contracts that are not bidded, or they're no bid contracts, I'll call them, that's something that the general public has expressed they're objectionable to. And I'm referencing, as an example, only the CTI landfill contract. Not saying it may be a vendor we want to replace, but how can you tell you're competitive unless you take bids periodically? So I'd like to see some type of emphasis on contracts with the county above some preset amount. I'm not going to suppose an amount, but they have to be subject to a bidding process. And ideally, you get 2 or 3 bids. I mean, when you go to roof your house, you certainly try to get more than one guy. And I realize that may not be practical, but the challenge is to get around the impracticability for the advantage you may gain.
So the county does have a contract policy that does require bids. However, there is a provision in it for renewals that are within the CPIU that don't require bidding. So perhaps the policy could be amended that you could only renew it possibly once or twice before it's rebid. But all any contract, the contracts are initially bid out, but the renewals can continue on. And the current policy doesn't have a cap, so it could be renewed 100 times without being rebid. So perhaps that would be appropriate to look at. It could only be renewed X amount of times before it has to be rebid, would be a suggestion.
Yeah, I would say that any renewal above a certain amount, because how can you evaluate the performance of a vendor? Very often, individual departments or areas, they get their favorites, but without bringing that up for renewal, it's not only a question of the price point, but their effectiveness.
My only caution I would say on that is, I understand the example of CTI, but there would be examples perhaps like inmate medical. We have a lot of very large contracts that only have a very small handful of bidders. And historically, if we bid it, we get one low bidder and several bidders that might be double the price. So if that bidder comes in with a 0% increase, to have to rebid it would require us, we have one purchasing person, so we would need more staff if we had to rebid every contract every time.
Certainly not. That's why I propose we put some lower limit. When it's above that limit, then it's worth the spending that
What kind of
time.
limit you thinking, Bob? I mean,
I'm not sure what's realistic, being I've just started here in January. I would think that anything above $75,000 or $100,000 should come up for review and rebid. I mean, that's a lot of money for the taxpayers, and it may take some time, but you're not only going for a good price, but evaluating their performance at that time. Otherwise, if they're just a shoe-in back in or automatic renewal, you lose that advantage.
Bob's talked to me about that. We've had a conversation a couple times, and I saw his point. You know, he said in the corporate world, they did them all the time. And I know from our perspective, you don't have time to do everything all the time. You know, it has to be a balance there to say, you know, if you have it, I don't like a race to the bottom. If I've got a company, whether it's in my business or whatever, and I like them, I'm not going to shop for a switch over just to save a few bucks because your risk a lousy performer. If I have a good performer, I want to keep them. So there's got to be a balance here, and just have a number stuck on it. Okay, it's 75, but this company's been fantastic and we love them. I'd probably keep them anyway. We're going to do it anyway out of some idea that we need to do it. I don't like that either. So I don't know, Carrie, any thoughts or maybe come back to us on that issue?
Yeah, and I mean, I would certainly want your department heads to weigh in on that, because there's a lot of time and work that goes into preparing the RFPs and disruption to service, potential disruption to service and operations as well. So it's going to not only put additional time on the purchasing staff, but on the departments operationally. So, and I understand the need to bid, and I do agree that renewing a contract 10 times because they're within CPIU, that may not be appropriate, but rebidding a vendor every time, once a year, let's say we only have a one-year contract, to have to rebid it every year may not be necessary.
No, absolutely, and that's why there'd be a minimal amount, and you're not necessarily going to race to the bottom. You may not pick the lowest bidder.
It's
It
like
just would be getting it in front of the board.
It's like our elevator contract, we figured out the hard way. We didn't have the right guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they blew their contract, blew an extension, blew another extension, and the elevator, after we fired him, it blew a hydraulic motor. You know, it's like, okay, we're going to get a different company. We found out the hard way.
My
Okay.
point is the contract I referenced earlier was over $1 million, and it was just renewed and renewed, and I think that that needs to come before the board. Certainly an amount somewhere between 10,000 and $1 million, we could hit a number that would make
I
sense.
think they do come before the board, though, Bob. I mean, our administrator knows these things, and I get your point that maybe there's a number, $1 million, any $1 million contract should be rebid. I wouldn't support that, only because I don't think that, I mean, work in a corporate world, but I don't think it's necessary here. We're trying to conserve resources, and, you know, we trust the administrator to look at it if we're having problems. The community tells us, you know, we have the sensibilities of all of us on the board here. Hey, we need to look at this. I've heard this, or I've heard that, or what's this deal? Like when the CTI thing came up on a consent agenda for an 8%, I pulled it off, said we need to look at that, and we did, okay, and it passed it. But, I mean, so it seems to be working, and I think your intent is laudable because you're looking for transparency, you're looking for, you know, looking out for the public dollar and all that. So, but how do you balance that with what administration does? So, Dave, you had a, Dave, go ahead, Dave.
The CTI, we're going to be addressing that anyways once we get to the landfill, so that's going to be addressed anyways. As far as the contracts, I'll make reference to my own company. I do about $500,000 with one of my customers, and I'm going to say we do such a fantastic job. They do not shop around. They don't want to take a risk of not giving the exact same product to their customer every time. So with that, I get everything from this customer. So I think we should trust Carrie and her judgment. Rather than say there's a dollar amount, trust her judgment. She's been doing this a long time. She has the staff, and I wouldn't want to put any additional work on her. I never want to put work on anybody that doesn't have to be done. So I would trust her maybe you got some specific guidelines, but I wouldn't want to see every single contract with contractors that we've been doing business with that have a proven history with us to jeopardize the services that will be given to the county. And then what the heck did you do that for? So I would trust Carrie. She's been at this. She's got a lot of contacts, and I would trust her on almost everything as far as the contracts. That's why she has the seat she has and why we put her in the place.
I would trust, but for amounts above a certain dollar, I'd like to verify. So I'd still like to see that as a goal, and we can evaluate how practical it is. It could be I'm missing something being new to government.
So as a general
operations.
goal, just enhance the review of contracts and renewals?
No bid contracts. We enhance review of any contracts that have.
We don't have
been
no bid I mean, are you renewals?
Yeah,
right?
it wouldn't be a no-bid contract, it would be a renewal.
Yeah, contracts
Because
and renewals.
the contracts would have all been either initially bid or part of a state cooperative that was bid at a different level.
What is our cutoff right now for, there's a certain cutoff, if we want to retain services, it has to be bid. What is that number?
So anything above $10,000 comes to you for your
They're all
approval.
bid, they all go before the board, and the renewals kind of roll along, but maybe there's a way to spot some of those better, something like that.
Okay.
I mean,
As long as we keep it on the list, I'd like to continue looking at that.
you'd like to maybe at least enhance review of contract renewals,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. It wouldn't hurt to put that on there, would it? I mean,
No, how about we put evaluate contract policy?
Okay, thank you.
Your list is over, Bob, or you gonna?
No, I have more.
Well, is anyone else that wants to go to kind of round robin? Does anyone else have anything other than, okay. Seeing nothing, go ahead.
Okay. A couple other things. During my campaign, I looked at our airport operations, and I know most of that is funded by the U.S. FAA. We have 27,000 flights per year per the FAA. 98% is general aviation per the FAA. Under 6,500 pounds, they pay no takeoff or landing fee. I know one of the funds that we gave the airport is approximately $210,000 a year from the landfill fee funds, which is kind of what got me started on this. So I talked to some of the pilots, and if you work out the math, if they paid $7 to take off and $7 to land, that would take care of the $210,000. My point is I'd like to see a user pay model for any of the county fees, not to take away from the airport, but to have the primary users fund that operation. The commercial operations, they already pay a landing fee, and it's incremental for weight and the size of the plane. What is basically general aviation or hobby flying, I don't believe that would be an issue to have the users chip in some when you're flying. Airplane is not a budget operation. So I'd like to see that put on the list. I think with the funding that we are providing, to have that not funded by the users, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You pay millages for everything else. You pay when you camp at a campground. The users pay. Why should the airport and the general aviation be any different?
Could we do it in a way perhaps, Carrie, that says we seek review and report? Don't we have an aeronautics advisory board?
We do have an aeronautics advisory board, so
Could we
they
maybe
could review
Put
that.
this item on to say, ask for an examination and report on that? Would that,
Yeah, perhaps review airport operations and fee structure.
I intended to get to that advisory board, but I haven't seen where they've had a meeting in quite a while.
because you weren't on a board.
Carrie, do you know how often they meet by chance, the advisory board? It seems like it's as needed as what it says on the web.
Yeah, they went quite a long time without meeting. I know our airport director is trying to establish a regular schedule, so I can get with her and see when the next meeting is and get back to
Or have her
you.
contact me if you
Yep.
would, because I'd like to study this a little bit before we just say we're going to change it. But it just seems to me like there's some room there if the people that are using it chip in a little bit. Definitely, the airport is a great thing. It's an asset to the community. It's a great hobby for the people that are flying. I'm not saying take that away, but a little bit more support may make a difference in how that's operated.
It would actually increase revenues if it's funded lots through grants and federal subsidies. That would just be additional income, right? That's what you're saying. Anyone else other than Bob? Otherwise, I'm going to go back to see how long his list is, but we're going to.
I have more.
Oh, Dave's got one.
I got three things.
We'll go back, where you do one, and Bob can do one, and whoever else wants to do one.
Appreciate this. We did have the goal setting, but Carrie's had goal setting every year anyways. This now we got kind of like a roadmap or a guide to go by, but this county is run by goals every single year. And Carrie gets, over the years, various commissioners, they have a thought, and she investigates and does it. But I appreciate this. I want to address three things in regards to our health department. Back when Dr. Mercantant, we were one of the rare counties that had an individual that had both positions as health director and medical director. We went to the standard format that I believe 82 of the 83 counties now use. I believe there's only one left that has that. Dr. Mercantant chose not to apply for either position when we decided that the commissioners decided to put it up for both to be up for bid, and she would be welcome to do that. She chose not to. The current contract for the health director and possibly the medical director, I think it'd be very easy for our corporate counsel to do, to just change a little bit of wording out of both contracts. I don't believe that the medical director should be reporting to the health director. I think he could be, or he or she, whoever holds that position, report to the county commissioners just like the health director does, and have them continue to work together. I don't think it's a healthy atmosphere for a person with the qualification of a medical director is subordinate to somebody with not the same qualifications. I think they should be separate and get a very similar setup to what we currently have for the medical, or for the health director to report to the county commissioners and also to our county administrator. The other item I got is the community mental health director. Currently, that position is reports to the advisory board. The advisory board is fine, but I'd like that to be changed to where it's the same thing as the health director and medical director, if we can do that, to where the reports to the county commissioners and also the county administrators. So I would like that format, if that's possible.
Just on that, Dave, I'll just interrupt you briefly. And Carrie, and I know we have corporation counsel here, but Carrie Angie's here. I believe community mental health is an authority. They're not a board or commission, they're an authority.
That's correct. So community mental health is set up the same as the road commission. They are their own separate legal authority. So they do not fall, you appoint their board, but we do not have any operational oversight over them.
So what you'd have to do is, through our board appointments, is how you would get the kind of exchange of information.
Right. Which is coming up very shortly, reappointments for that board. Is it any chance to have that changed where the community mental health
That's state
is set
law.
up?
I think that's state law.
So the community mental health used to be a county department up until January of 2000. There was a law change in 99 that allowed them to become an authority, and the board passed a resolution at that time allowing them to do that. So they separated. That was right when I started, so I don't know what the decision or the discussion was back then. So that would be a question for legal counsel, what would be involved in, once again, making them a county department?
I would like that to be just, get some information on it.
You would like to know the options for rescinding the
Definitely.
authority.
Yeah. Because without any oversight, and depending on who sits on the advisory board, there's an awful lot of services being rendered throughout the county that really has no oversight other than the people that sit on the advisory board.
We appoint.
Correct. And if we have a resident, I'm just going to speak for District 6, we all have our own districts, but if I have, which I do have, an individual that calls me often, is not very happy with our community mental health. And with that, I really don't have any input I can do other than, possibly talk to the advisory board. There's no avenue for the county commissioners to take any action if we have a issue. I mean, without court orders or other stuff like that, and I don't want to do that.
Carrie, do you know the reason, is there any pros or cons, whether it's a department versus an authority? Do you have any background on that?
So for liability reasons, since they provide health and medical services, they have their own liability insurance. So all of that liability falls on them, not the county. As part of the law, when they became an authority, we had to continue to fund them at the level we did at that time, which is around just under $1 million that we give them every year. And I know we did get a legal opinion at one point, probably around 2008, 9, if we could reduce that funding. And I don't recall what it says, but I do have that legal opinion still. So if they became a county department, if their budget shortfall was greater than that $1 million we give them, it could potentially cost us more, and then we would have to absorb any liability that comes with providing those medical services.
Where does the funding come from now that exceeds what the county provides?
They get a lot of state and federal funding. Insurance billings would be my guess, fee for service.
It would not be available to a county department maybe, or no?
All those same fundings would be there. You know, they have their own finance department, they have their own audit. They're considered a component unit because we appoint their board and we give them funding, but we don't do anything with their books, so I'm not really.
Isn't the library looking at doing that? Isn't that something, there was some chatter about maybe the library having their own authority?
The library over the years has discussed the potential of being a district library. You know, I can't speak to where that's at right now. That would be a question for the library
I don't know if that was a similar
director.
kind of structure or not. What else did you have, Dave? You had a third item? Dave, you had one more item or no? Did you have one more thing or no?
I think that's pretty much it.
So you're going to put that last of Dave's concern down as, get some information from Corporation Counsel on,
Yep, on CMH, and then evaluate the health department's organizational structure.
Yeah, that'd be, and back to that, just reiterate, the health director, I've looked at both contracts. I think it'd be very easy to change its slight wording in the contracts. That would have the medical director set up very similar to the health director. As far as the medical director being subordinate to the health director, I think a couple lines out of the contract would take care of that for the medical, or the health director, but.
I'll comment on that, Dave. I mean, what's occurred with our health department, and I've talked to Liz King about it, and I've had some discussions with Nevin one or two occasions, but they need to, and I put it in different communications to the board, I want to make sure that they really collaborate well. We need to have, when you have a division like that, a medical doctor and a health officer, they really do have to collaborate well. And I've had some pretty frank discussions, especially in light of some of what occurred with this lighthouse report business. You know, we came in, I talked to Liz about that and some others, how, you know, where that's at. So, and I think the contract, looking at it, because I too have looked at it, and it's more the job descriptions. I've asked for the job descriptions, reviewed those. They're a bit incongruous, and I do agree with Dave in the sense that, you know, as an attorney, I've never reported to a intern or a secretary, you know, or a law clerk. I mean, so say report to, we need to have, to me, and what I think it's vetted out by attorney general opinions and other things, is each of those two positions have their own area of discretion. That part-time medical doctor has an area of discretion, and then the health officer has an area of discretion, and they need to collaborate just out of common sense. You know, with Mercantile, it's pretty easy, it's one person. And I've actually been trying to have some discussions with some folks about how to make that happen, and I think there's interest in making that happen, but I think maybe that's what Dave's getting at is how that, I would too like to look at that, not to get from Corporation Counsel his ideas, but if you want a workshop or have some way, maybe I've got some thoughts myself, but if there's some interest perhaps in just making sure that our health department can, if we examine their operations so that it's functioning as best it can, something like that, that's what I'm looking for. So, is that what you're talking about, Dave? Okay, Bob.
Yeah, I can be more specific on that if I could take a minute.
Is that on your list?
Yeah, I'm on the Health Advisory Board, and I've been to a couple meetings now. I've spoke with Liz King, spoke with Dr. Nevin. They serve separate functions as I've seen it. It's advisor or a resource versus an operation of the health department. Liz has told me herself, Liz King, that it's a interesting situation for a nurse to supervise a doctor. And I have a lot of respect for both of those fields. But I think that change would be welcome to have both of them having a parallel path reporting to the board. and then they work together, but they're not in a situation where one is supervising the other. That's kind of what I got out of it by actually talking to the people involved.
And that comes, for me, it comes from the job descriptions, because it's not in state law, that is in the job descriptions, and it's just, I think we should look at that and make some changes there, so. But I did talk to Liz the other day about it, and I said, you know, same thing, I said, I know how to do a law practice manage, I don't know how a doctor's office manages. She says, well, it's not a doctor's office, it's a health department. I said, okay, so, you know, is there a difference if you have a doctor managing a doctor's office versus, you know, a part-time doctor advising a health department? That's different. So I'm trying to get that figured out too, but I think it'll help to clarify, get everybody on the same board. And I think they are collaborating in a number of areas, but I think it just needs some clarification, and that note would suffice.
And it's a little deeper than that, because Dr. Nevin is a resource for the health department. That's how I see it. So if you have him supervised by the health department, how objectively can he give his input and guidance? I see that creating an interesting situation. So I think it would be welcomed by both parties.
Okay, Bob, anything else, or you?
Yes, just one more thing. First off, Carrie, thank you for putting this together, and your staff. This is excellent. I appreciate having the chance to have a workshop, and I know that because of extenuating circumstances, we weren't able to have this earlier, and I appreciate that, what you're going through. But I really welcome this opportunity to look at and see where we can improve and set goals. And along those lines, I've been looking at changes to our bylaws. We've already got a bunch of them on the table. Perhaps this doesn't need to be a goal, but the overall goal, I would think, would be to improve the ethics and the transparency of our Board of Commissioners. And I'd like to see that as a goal. And one specific thing that comes to my mind is a bylaw change to limit the chairman of the board to consecutive terms as a chair to 8 years. And I'm just putting this out for negotiation and discussion. Don't have to settle it today. Steve said, unless maybe it's a unanimous vote. My goal is to prevent the situation where you have a long-standing chair for 13 or 15 or 20 years, unless it's something that the board maybe puts in unanimously or something else. So just overall goal would be to continue to improve the ethics and transparency of the Board of Commissioners. And that should be a goal that we would all share, I hope.
On that point, first of all, tonight on the agenda, we're going to add the ethics and the conflict provisions that we've all looked at. So that, put the box in and put a check in it. We've done that. On the term limit, I looked at that 2 years ago, and I had some conversations with our board chair and this and that, and they're interesting as perspective on how we all operate. But what it came down to, you'll notice, if you maybe you've read it, but in there it already has, I did add a provision at that time, or we did as a board, for a basically a supermajority to bounce the chair and the vice chair, 5 out of 7. I thought, well, the chair's going to vote for himself, and probably then the vice chair. So if you're that far out of the loop, you're history. So, and then I mentioned to Bob about term limits. I said, well, sometimes, just like when Jeff Bohm took over in 2010, I didn't want that job. I was too busy. I didn't care for it. I didn't want that job. There was nobody else really that wanted it, or I thought I'd be very good at it. And so, so Jeff did that. Now, he was there 14 years. That's an amazing run. But he had support for those 14 years of the board. So rather than bounce somebody that the board wants, I suggested add whatever term limit you want. In 8 years, I don't know what will be, where Steve Samasco will be. But in 4 years, I'm not sure where I'll be, right? So, but this maybe say other than if there's unanimous consent, because I can see situations where someone's doing a fine job and you really don't want to change it, and there's like, well, I bumped up against this thing, so maybe just add a caveat, except in the circumstance where there's unanimous consent. And,
That would make sense.
if you guys want to consider that, I have no problem with it.
Well, historically, when I was township supervisor and I'd come to these meetings, it seemed like it was a revolving chairs for the chair, and you were involved with some of that. Pat Anger was on there, Wally Evans was on there, but it seemed like it was like,
I replaced Pat Anger in 07.
And it looked like 2-year terms. It just happened that way. And that kind of sees what's happened again in Macomb County too. And they changed from Democrat to Republican, but they seem to work together. But I'll give that some thought as far as term limits. But on the availability, whoever gets elected to these seats, because they're just revolving seats, not everybody can be chair and be available to work with the county administrator on a daily basis. So if we were to put somebody in that seat, just because the person that is available can no longer sit there, but that might be a detriment, just top thoughts.
So maybe Carrie, just add, examine the possibility for term limits, maybe something like that, right?
That's good. That's good.
Does anyone else have any other matters of this nature? Anybody else that hasn't spoken want to say anything? No? Nothing, so. Well, do I have to ask 3 times? Anything you want to say, Carrie? Any afterthoughts or?
No, I would just suggest that perhaps you open the floor to any of your department heads that might want to add anything to the goals or anything they submitted.
I don't know about that. Are there any department heads here? If you wish to speak, raise your hand and we'll address it. Have you come up and any comments for the board? Any pearls of wisdom? Sheriff, first guy with his hand in the air. Matthew King.
There's always one.
Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to come here and speak today. Thanks, Carrie, for putting this together. It was a lot of work. Knowing that you all have the list that we all put forth, I'm not going to go over every single one. I did think that it might be somewhat of a gladiator battle between the department heads for the funds, right? We're all fighting for ourselves, but it's good to see everybody in here working together. And we're here all in our own capacity to serve the public and be transparent. I'm not going to talk too much on my points because, again, you guys have them. I think you did a good job of collectively putting them in categories, Carrie, and your team. And I don't want to specifically get too into depth in everything that ever was brought up. Much of it has nothing to do with me by the commissioners. But we are a department that seeks bids for contract, probably more as an individual department than any other department. And Carrie brought up the medical in the jail. So I want to invite the opportunity for any county commissioner, Mr. Felix, to contact me and understand how some of that works. And I think you guys probably came up with a good resolution, but I did want to speak on it a little bit because we do have so many contracts and they are so important. As an elected official, obviously, we seek our own contracts. We have to follow the policy by the Board of Commissioners and that Carrie makes sure that we follow, which is good because we have a good working relationship. But again, if we were to have to bid out on a regular basis every time a contract was up, we would need additional staff too. And probably every other county department head or elected official, specifically elected officials, because we kind of run that all our own. And it would cost us a lot of time, but more specifically to Board Chair Samasko's point and Mr. Rushing, the consistency of service and the cost. Medical is probably the easiest one to talk about. We have obviously a very expensive medical cost in the jail because of how things operate today. That includes mental health services, medications, and everything. We would have a huge disruption of services to our inmates and detainees. But we would probably be getting these bids at double of what we get. So we get a contractor in, they are working with us, they have, we'll say 20 contracts throughout the state, and all of those medical people, and a lot of the other services, you know, with our tablets and so many other services we have in the jail, it's very competitive. So once they get us, they want to keep us. So we're getting very much lower bids than we would get for continuing a contract. They've already done the work to secure that contract. And our staff inside and out are working with them. And then also, for instance, for the medical staff, they are hiring people to work in our jail. So they may be local people working for this company that may be in Ohio because they got a regional type reach. And if we've gone to other contractors and found like, okay, it's a better bid, it's time to move on, because there is time, it's time to move on. We should always examine those things, I agree with you. But then all of a sudden, they don't have the staff. And they said they'd pay for 3 medical health nurses, and we've got 1.5 because they can't get anybody to work. So it's a deep dive into continuing contracts. And then, of course, really all we got to do is call around to the 81 other sheriffs or maybe the 14 other sheriffs that are about our size and say, hey, what are you guys paying? And we're like, holy smokes, okay, we got it good. So I invite a conversation with Mr. Felix to maybe go over a little bit. I know most of the people on the board here have probably experienced some of those things. But I did want to talk on that specifically because it is a very time-consuming thing, specifically for my jail administrator, Mr. Cosson, and my undersheriff, Mr. Spatafor. And they already spend a lot of time. So if we were to have to rebid all those very quickly, it'd be expensive. Very quickly, I'd probably have some corrections deputies wanting to tear me apart because it changes everything, as Mr. Vanden Bosch knows. Working relationships and continuity of service is so important. And by all means, when we have a bad contract or a really high bid, as Carrie will look at it and we'll talk like, hey, it's time to rebid, and we do. So that's all. Just wanted to bring a little information to the board. Thank everybody for listening to our ideas. Again, we submitted a document. While I'm standing here, if you have any questions for me, reference this document, I'll answer them. If not, I don't want to take up too much time.
Any questions for Sheriff King? Seeing none, thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Any other department heads that wish to address the board? Seeing none, any citizens will have the same courtesy here. Anyone else have any comments for the board without filling out a slip and so forth? There are none, so
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
fails for lack of second.
Support.
There we go. All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.